Today's show is brought to you by our sponsors at Betterment Advisor Solutions. If you happen to be thinking there's got to be a better way to grow my RA, you're not alone. With Betterment Advisor Solutions, we do the heavy lifting so you can focus on what matters most, your clients. From improved service that makes asset transition smoother to fast, paper-free onboarding that delights clients on day one, we've built a digital-first platform designed to streamline your operations and make life easier. Now, if you're thinking, wow, they take the paper out of paperwork, then you'd be right. Grow your RIA your way with Betterment Advisor Solutions. Learn more at betterment.com/advisors. Investing involves risk, performance not guaranteed. Welcome back to The Unlock. This is Ben with Benefits. On today's show, I am joined by Scott Ricks. Scott is the author of Tightwads and Spendthrifts, a wonderful book that takes a deep dive into one of my favorite financial topics, the psychology of spending money. So Scott, people often lament the fact that we don't teach personal finance in school, but I think even the people who do teach personal finance now, that's on blogs and Substacks and podcasts and such, I feel like the subject that rarely gets enough attention is spending money. Right? The focus is on saving and frugality and paying off debt and budgeting and even index fund investing in these things, right? And if anything, spending itself is frowned upon. So what are the main points that you like to teach people and let people know when it comes to spending? Because again, I think it's the topic that's the most overlooked in all of personal finance.
Yes. It's often viewed very negatively and as the reason why people go into debt as opposed to other things like medical expenses and kind of unforeseen bad things. But no, it's very important. And there are a lot of people, we call them tightwads, who just underspend so much that it really kind of eats away at their well-being. So I think it is important to help promote responsible spending and find ways to make it less painful than it needs to be. Spending is often painful, but and that pain can be a good, brakes on the car. But sometimes the brakes work a little too well. And, some people need a little help kind of loosening up. And that's where I try to come in.
Yeah, and I want to get into that too. So you have two types of people who, people who spend too much, people who save too much. You call them tightwads and spendthrifts. You also say that neither of them are really happy, right, with the situation. Do you think, is it even possible to strike the right balance? Like, how many people actually get to that place where we have some middle ground and not just the extremes? Because it seems to me like most people are at the extremes.
Well, the way there's different ways to define it. The way we do it in our scale, we do find about half the people are in this middle ground of what we call unconflicted consumers.
Okay, so it's more than I thought then.
Yeah. So they get less attention because they're kind of less interesting from a psychological perspective because they're happy and well adjusted. But and then there's about 25% each on the two extremes, tightwad and spendthrift. So it's quite a few. And even if you're not one, you're probably have one close to you in your life. And
right, everyone.
Yes.
So Scott, you share some studies in the book about how people often don't even realize how much money they spent when they were just in a store or something, right? They come out of the store and you ask them, how much money do you spend? With everything being more digital these days and the ability to track these things, but also the fact that you're just swiping or tapping or pushing a button now, it's not as much cash as it used to be. Is it getting easier or harder to control your spending? Because I think I worry about my kids never really growing up with cash and everything is just online or it's a push of a button or a swipe or a tap. And you lose some of that relationship, like the loss aversion piece is almost gone now. Do you think it's harder than ever to control your spending because of that?
I do. And some of us have confidence that, it's all trackable and, digitized. I could very easily kind of pull this up and, see what I've been doing. But do we do that? We're comfortable it's there, but we might not go in and, dig into the details. So really, if you have an overspending problem, you have to set up these psychological speed bumps and friction and kind of make it more kind of old school and tangible and collect physical receipts and put it into Excel yourself rather than, it's the same information, but you have to feel it. You have to experience it in some sense. And if I'm a retailer, it's just the opposite. I want you to not even know it happens. Like Amazon Go, just like walk out, there's no checkout process. So, it's these two forces kind of pulling in different directions.
So I kind of want to focus more on the tightwad part of it because
Yeah.
in my day job in wealth management, when I joined Ritholtz Wealth, the person who's created our financial planning process, Chris Venn, he told me that one of the biggest problems that our advisors face when working with clients is helping them spend their money. And I almost didn't believe him at first, not being in this world, because how is that possible? And then I started witnessing this, over and over again. And it's not just anecdotes of people who, spend 30 to 40 years building a business and selling it, or slowly but surely saving in a 401k and an IRA and a taxable brokerage account. And then when they hit retirement, then to have to flip that switch, they just couldn't do it, right? Psychologically, it was just a hurdle because, um, you know, retirement is scary and there's all these irreducible uncertainties. And I just don't know how much healthcare is going to cost. And so they delayed gratification and delayed it and delayed it. But then even when it was time to have some gratification, they couldn't do it. So what would you tell financial advisors who are in this situation when it comes to helping their clients overcome this obstacle? Because it doesn't seem like, it's a first world problem, obviously, but this is something that we deal with all the time where we're trying to give our clients permission. Like, no, you can take that big vacation. You can buy the second home or the convertible. But it is a hurdle for a lot of people, that
Yes.
mental block.
Yeah. And I think this is a great place for financial advisors and planners because people have trouble spending. They cannot justify in the moment, um, using the money for that kind of optional or hedonic purpose. Um, they just can't convince themselves that they can afford it. And so I think this is a great place for budgeting. We often think about budgeting as a way to reduce spending, but for someone who has an underspending problem, the budgeting can help you start spending. So if you can earmark and set aside funds that are meant for, enjoyment and just living life, it's there when you encounter these opportunities for the vacation or whatever it might be.
Right. So every year I'm going to spend 25 grand on vacation, come hell or high
Yes.
water, and I'm
Yes.
not going to feel bad about it.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
for the spreadsheet warriors, that probably is the best way to do it. It's just you have to plan it out as opposed to like feeling like you're spending willy-nilly.
Yeah. And yeah, exactly. And so once it's earmarked, you can kind of treat the money. It's already gone. So it's not like you're spending anew when the opportunity comes up. You've already kind of set it aside, and so it's meant to be spent. And so yeah, and there's research on this that tightwads, if you can kind of budget in advance for fun, that they can really kind of spend more of what they actually want. They can reduce that frustration and start kind of living their life.
Yeah, and we always say the biggest question most people want answered from their financial advisor is, "Am I going to be okay?" And it's kind of like, if I spend this money and I get this convertible or this second home or whatever it is, like, am I going to be okay? And that's the financial advisor's job to tell them, like, yes, it's okay to spend it, and you have permission. But a lot of people, again, it's not a problem I ever would have foreseen, but it happens more and more often. And my one question is, so this is, mostly baby boomers, obviously, that are the ones who are retiring these days. I think the number is, I always throw out, is 10,000 baby boomers retiring every day from now until the end of the decade, right? And so like the need for financial advice in the years ahead and retirement planning is huge. How much of this idea of spending is generational? Because I've noticed a big shift in young people in terms of their appetite for risk is way greater, and they almost feel more free to spend on travel. Do you think there's a generational divide at all in the spending habits?
I think so. It's always tricky to see, is it generational? Is it an aging effect? Um, and sometimes what we find is that, you know, young adults right now, they don't look a lot like their parents in terms of their spending, at least when they leave the house initially. But later in life, they kind of come back to what they saw from their parents. So we become our parents eventually, it seems to be the
Yeah.
finding. Um, but no, I mean, I've certainly seen uh, a lot of younger people questioning, like, what am I saving for? Like, there's so much uncertainty and instability. And um, so yeah, it does seem like people respond differently to kind of uh, crises in the world, like save a lot or just like, hey, what, you know, let's enjoy life while we have it.
Right. So
You
yeah, so
know?
we have the potential, tightwads for the retiring boomers, and then the spendthrifts for their children. Um,
Yes.
Now there are studies that show, and I'm generalizing here. It's something like 80% of the wealthy class created the wealth on their own, and something like 15 to 20% got it through inheritance or through the family or something like that. It's
Mm,
those numbers are close, and there isn't much of a playbook when it comes to passing along good spending habits to the next generation. And I think this is a worry for a lot of people who have money. Right? Is like, how do you balance the desire to give your children everything with the optics of spoiling them and then turning them into spending monsters, right? I worry about this with my kids all the time. Like, I
yes.
want them to have great experiences and great memories, but I also don't want them to feel like everything we do is just spending freely. So how do you balance that when you do build some wealth and you have the ability to spend, but you don't want to spend on everything or show
Yes.
or give them bad habits? Because you said a lot of children turn to their parents when it comes to financial habits.
Yes. Well, and one thing to keep in mind is that um, children are more likely to kind of mimic what they see the parents do than to listen to verbal advice, especially if these are going in different directions. So if I'm telling you save, don't don't spend so quickly, and then I go out and buy a boat, like that's what's going to matter. Um, but you know, so keeping that in mind, one thing you can do, and I'm like you, I want us to have these experiences, and but we can't have all the experiences. So I like to talk through the opportunity costs. Like, well, we could do this, but this means we're going to forego some other things that we would also love to do. Um, and it's okay to make those trade offs. But if they just kind of see what you spend, that's going to be invisible in the background. So I try to make that more visible and more salient. Like, yes, this is what we're foregoing, and we understand that, and we make the choice anyway. It's worth it.
So we talked about experiences here, and all the studies show that like you should buy experiences as opposed to material possessions, right? That'll bring you more happiness. It creates more lasting memories, and I'm on board with that. Like, my wife and I make travel a priority because we want to create memories with our kids. As I get to like middle age, and maybe I have to turn in my personal finance card on this one, but the older I get, I do find myself getting more enjoyment out of certain material possessions, right? And I mean, do you think it really matters what people spend their money on as long as they sort of define their guilt-free categories ahead of time? Is like I feel like some people, again, the personal finance scolds think it's like bad to enjoy material possessions, but I actually think like it's okay in certain instances. Like, if that brings you some joy to buy those shoes or whatever, do it.
Yeah. No, I there is a lot of scolding, and the material experiential thing at the divide is not as clear as we would want to think. You can think of like a furnace or an air conditioner as a material thing, but boy, it's going to change a lot of experiences in the home. And no, I mean, I think a lot of material things can be attached to experiences. Um, the things that you like collect with your kids, if you're into some kind of collection, and that becomes a experience searching for it, and looking into it, I think that could be cool. But no, yeah, this divide is kind of overgeneralized, and
So you don't think the bang for your buck is that much more with experiences in a lot of ways?
well, I do think you know shared experiences, whether it's attached to something material or not, are kind of the top of the mountain. Things where you can have anticipation, and the memories, um, and something where you can kind of learn about each other and do something new together. That's really where it is, and I wouldn't worry so much about how much of it is material. Also,
So you write a little bit in your book about the dealing with couples, because obviously sometimes opposites attract, and one person is a spendthrift, the other, right, is a tightwad.
yeah.
Um, who tends to win in that situation? Is there one mindset that tends to win, or is it just both people are kind of miserable because they're butting heads?
Yeah. Well, there's battles and there's wars, and what we find is that tightwads win a lot of battles, but spendthrifts tend to win the wars. So there's a lot of tightwads kind of swatting away requests or ideas like, no, we can't afford that. But if I'm a spendthrift, I might not just dismiss that. I might kind of return to it over and over again. And eventually I'll find my moment, or I'll be persuasive enough and we'll do it. And once the money's spent, it's spent. And, a no is very reversible. But once you spend the, $10,000 on a vacation, that can't be reversed. And so, the spendthrifts do tend to win eventually in these mismatched pairings. And that's not always a bad thing. I'm a spendthrift. My wife's a tightwad. I like to think I've helped us drag us to some, novel experiences and through persistence.
So if you're thinking about this from the financial advisor perspective, who's kind of the mediator in that, like what is their role in helping both people be happy?
Yeah. It's, you want to, it should not always be, one person consistently winning or the other. I would say anything where there is an element of experience involved, I would tend to defer to the more spendthrifty spouse's desires there because of what we know about the benefits of shared experiences. If they are disagreeing over something that is more material or tangible, again, even though it's okay to like material things, but if it's a source of disagreement, then I would tend to side with the more tightwad spouse. That is how I would suggest breaking the ties, just in terms of our best bet about what delivers lasting happiness.
It is funny how often I've heard over the years, thank you for giving me a nudge to spend this. When I looked at the dollar amount, it was very painful. But after going through the experience, I'm so glad that I did it. I don't think you rarely get a time where someone spends a lot of money on something like that experience or whatever with their family or friends and they regret it. Right.
Right. That's right. Yeah. And I wish more people realize that in advance.
So I don't want to spoil too much for the book, but I love, could you tell us just the Sammy Davis Jr. story? Because I think that's like one of my favorite extreme examples.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So I read Yes, I Can, the autobiography, and it's just
so
beautiful.
he's the one he wrote this story.
He had some friends help him out, but yeah.
Right. Yeah.
And so people were always criticizing him for overspending, and he would kind of bring up like, well, no, I think you're underspending. Like, do I want to just be kind of an old man, like not functional and sit there with a pile of money, not being able to enjoy it? Like, what kind of life is that? An advisor of his gave him some advice to like stop spending so much. Like, this is crazy. And he was such a generous guy with his spending. He was like, okay, I hear you, I understand. And so he went and bought him like a gold cigarette lighter with his name engraved, like, thank you for the financial advice. Like, the guy was like, no, this is not what I meant. But yeah, he just really articulates the struggle. Like, when do we eat, drink, and be merry? Is it okay to kind of enjoy our money? And I think he ended up taking it too far eventually. But I think a lot of his instincts were right. And he just really articulated like the kind of some of the big life struggles and decisions. It's kind of a beautiful thing.
So when I first started writing about investing, my mindset as a young person was, well, I'll be able to save everyone. But unfortunately, you realize eventually you can't save everyone. There's some people who are just bound to make mistakes. And do you think that some of the people who are the biggest spendthrifts are just kind of a lost cause, and that certain people just aren't ever going to really get it?
Yeah. Well, I think there are certain mistakes you can learn from, and this is where a financial advisor or planner can come in. But it's interesting. What the research finds is that you would think once spendthrifts learn, like if they're often making these mistakes of overspending, like wouldn't they figure it out? But if you make an expected mistake, if you kind of mess up in a way that you kind of saw coming, there's no real learning from that. We learn from surprises and unexpected mistakes. And so those are moments where you can stop and reflect and actually update your understanding of yourself. Um, so yes, it's possible to learn from mistakes, but the mistakes have to be kind of framed and experienced in kind of a novel way.
Right, because a lot of people know that the spending is bad, but they keep doing it, right?
Yes,
Going
yes,
into further debt or
yes.
so any parting words for financial advisors in terms of translating your research into actionable financial advice for their clients?
Yeah. Um, you know, I, assuming you're talking to, couples or people with, children or other people in their life who are kind of shaping their decisions. Just it's good to understand kind of everyone's perspective, who's coming at it from a more tightwad or a more spendthrift perspective, and it can help to kind of contextualize what people have been saying or their advice or their desires. It could help you understand. Well, it's not that they don't care about this. It's just they have this block or this blind spot. Um, so you can really kind of misunderstand each other. I like to think about gifts. Like you can get a bad gift from a tightwad and think, well, they don't love me. It's just the money part. It's not, they just couldn't express it um, in a way that you were looking for. So I think it just helps to put context on everything, and and then there are these things that we know how to reframe things for tightwads and spendthrifts a little bit. So and I'm sure you're doing this anyway, just getting to know people and their
It's funny. I started my life off as more of a tightwad, and I've slowly but surely coaxed myself into spending more. And I think part of it is just having kids and personal
Yes.
experiences and these sorts of things. But there are still certain things that I just refuse. So I always get mad at my wife for buying these $7.99 Hallmark cards that we sign and we throw away on anniversary. So I started making her cards personally. That's my tightwad in me.
Yes, that's
Um,
beautiful. Yeah.
and the other thing is though that I just this is a trope I constantly hit on for people is the $80,000 and $90,000 trucks. I always get really mad at, and I don't care if that fits within your financial situation, but I know that there's a lot of people who probably can't afford those vehicles, and it's a depreciating asset. Is there anything that you spend shame people on, or are you pretty open minded about these things?
uh I am probably too open-minded. I am
So as
there's
long as it's within your plan, whatever, spend on what you like.
yeah, right. Now I'm willing to listen to kind of other people in the life saying this is hurting us because, and if the truck is kind of, now the kids can't go to college, you're like, yeah, we could have that
Yeah,
conversation.
that's
But
my
yeah,
mindset. Yeah,
yeah,
right. But yeah, whatever. I guess teach your own is the thing, and I think that's one of the things too. Is I've had people ask me recently, like, I'm a personal finance spreadsheet person. How do I force myself to spend money? I think you give yourself these guilt-free things, and it could be starting out small. For me, it was
yes,
going from when I was first trying to learn more about the markets, I would go to the library all the time. And sometimes, a lot of times, the books I wanted to check out were taken, and I'd have to wait for them and wait for them and wait for them. And finally, I thought, this is a 1099 book. Why don't I just buy these? So every time I see a book that I want, I just buy it now. And I probably buy too many. But I think if you have those little categories where it's under a certain amount, or it's a certain area that you think is going to be useful for you, just give yourself permission all the time. I have a green light here.
yeah. It's like a baseball pitcher. You got to warm the arm up a little bit, and you can
Yeah,
work up to something bigger later. Absolutely, yes.
perfect.
And
All right.
it,
Okay.
yeah,
So besides the book, where else can we send people to follow your research?
yeah. ScottRick.com, and I post kind of the latest papers there, and I'm on all the socials. And,
Perfect. Yeah, and your
yeah,
book, again, it's great. I think financial advisors should read this because it's really helpful in determining that psychology and what sort of impacts certain people depending on their mindset. I think it's really
yes,
important to help understand people. So, if you're an advisor, subscribe to our newsletter at advisorunlock.com. We're sharing everything you need to know about the business to get ahead and stay ahead. Subscribe to the Unlock YouTube channel as well. Thank you, Scott, for coming on. We appreciate it. We'll see you next time, everyone.
Ben, thank you so much.